what's going to come out in Transferable Everything as a book is the importance of things like critical thinking.
Sure.
It's taught in school, but I don't know how much it's intentionally taught.
Because I either didn't enjoy the subject matter, I felt like I was being pushed into it or forced into it, and so there was absolutely zero value to extract from that outside of maybe cultivating extreme patience.
Last year, I brought my oldest child to school for the very first time. I can still clearly remember the feeling of grabbing the handle of the door to his school and this incredible amount of anxiety that came over me. Just this commitment to go on a journey for any topic and find what is true. And I made the decision to not go to post-secondary and to take a chance on myself to fly to the south of France and pursue my dream of becoming a professional soccer player.
If I rely on curiosity alone, I'm never going to spend enough time on any given subject to become or have a level of proficiency.
Everybody understand whether you're an athlete transitioning, a soldier leaving the military, or someone whose career is being disrupted by AI, or anything, or just a significant moment in your life of transition. It is an opportunity, not without trial. Tribulation absolutely can be something beautiful if you intentionally apply a lot of the things that we're talking about. All right, welcome back to the Transferable Everything podcast. We're still working on section 1 of our book, and the next chapter is the world as our classroom. And this is probably one of my favorite topics to discuss. James and I, you and I have discussed this for years now.
Sure.
And the purpose of this chapter in the book is to sort of level set the idea between school as an institution and education, because I think there's a distinct difference. And the intention behind Transferable Everything is, it, at least in part, to try and create a form of education where the world can become our classroom. And I think that's something that's critically important, something that's kind of been lost a little bit over the years. Probably, maybe just generally speaking, maybe something I can't necessarily put an actual finger on, but something I've felt, I've seen, I've observed, both as a student myself, as a parent, and as an employer, bringing people into the organization. So I'm really excited for this topic.
Yeah.
And I think this episode is probably going to be similar to the challenges of actually writing the book.
Right.
So in writing this chapter, one of the hardest parts is to be very concise with the words and actually condense a lot of the material. I probably have more material for this chapter than maybe all of the others. And so making it concise and in a way that isn't anti-school or anti-establishment or anything like that, because it can come off that way.
Yeah.
And so it's probably just harder to be very narrow and specific. But anyways, I'm really excited for this one. So what are your thoughts to sort of kick us off?
Yeah. The difference between education and school, I think there's a massive divide between those two things, even though they appear to be connected quite intimately. For me, when it comes to education at all, at least being able to absorb what you've learned comes down to intention.
Right.
When you're learning in life, you're learning through the things that you choose to do, and you don't necessarily choose to go to school. Speaking from my experience, particularly when I was in school, elementary and high school, for instance, there are many subjects where I didn't get a lot out of, even in like a transferable aspect, reflecting and thinking what I might have extracted from any particular class. Because I either didn't enjoy the subject matter, I felt like I was being pushed into it or forced into it, and so there was absolutely zero value to extract from that outside of maybe cultivating extreme patience.
Sure.
Yeah. It's the things that I've chosen to do outside of the classroom or the classes that I was able to choose to do where I extracted the most value.
Yeah, absolutely. Inside of the classroom, even for the things that you chose to do, what did you find was there a particular form of teaching that resonated more with you, that you felt that you were able to it download more information, or it was more palatable for you?
I think I don't think there was any specific one, actually. I think it was more determined by the class that I was in.
Okay.
So I had some teachers who were particularly adept orators, super engaging, and they could get you to engage with the subject matter without you fully needing to read it. They were so good at explaining it or guiding you through material. The course readings almost were unnecessary because he was so good at explaining it.
Right.
Where others I found were not so good teachers, or you're reading something like Shakespeare or any of the classic works in an English class. Those things kind of speak for themselves. You don't necessarily need a high school teacher to, I don't want to, maybe I don't want to shit on people, but I don't know. It's something that's been spoken about for hundreds of years. I don't know how much they have to add on top of the preface to the book that I also have to read.
Right. Yeah, that's totally fair. I think one of the things that, this is an example that I've used in my experience that I found particularly challenging. And it can maybe be chalked up to standardized testing potentially, or something similar to that. But history. I've loved history my whole life. In particular, growing up World War II, found it incredibly fascinating. And so I was really excited to finally, in high school, I remember this very clearly, to have a history class, a class that I was actually interested outside of, gym class or something like that. And I was so incredibly disappointed, largely because most of what we were learning was memorizing key dates, battles, key points in the war, and not that they're of no value, learning about those key moments and what happened to a degree, but I was more interested in, what were the conditions that led us there? Psychologically, propaganda in particular was something I always found very fascinating. We spent little to no time on that topic,
right?
And so it kind of sucked the air out of me, if you will. My flame of curiosity and thirst for knowledge was almost put out through that experience.
Because it became too mechanical?
Yeah. Yeah. It was okay, well, this means nothing to me. It did, cool, D-Day was on this day.
Sure.
And, to some degree, I had to focus on trying to at least pass the course.
Yeah.
Memorization was not something I did very well. And so I had to spend a lot of time thinking, okay, all of these things that I'm finding fascinating or interesting that I'd like to explore deeper, I have to put that out of sight, out of mind, and I have to focus all of my cognitive power on memorizing this date, this date, this date.
Instead of getting into the nuance and the context that allow these situations to occur.
Absolutely. And in the nuance, there's so much. So it would be probably a really hard task for a teacher. But I think I would have so much more respect if they could at least help us go on a journey and explore it. We always think teachers have to have the answers, and I don't think they have to have the answers for every question in every topic that they teach. I think in many ways, the best thing that they can do is sort of help you go on an adventure and guide you on asking questions and the exploration.
Yeah, speaking to what a teacher in a high school setting or an elementary school setting can give you, there is something to be said about the amount of time that they have and the amount of content that has to be condensed into that time.
Sure.
I know they're not responsible for the curriculum, obviously, so there's some of that to play into it as well. But using your World War example, needing additional context or nuance, we could look at the assassination of Franz Ferdinand.
Sure.
An incredibly interesting event, but you could dedicate an entire university level course just to the political context and et cetera leading up to that particular event. So, I mean, how can you pick and choose the areas where that nuance is afforded?
I think the thing that is most beneficial in a classroom setting even if you can't explore all of the nuance, if at the very least, you talk about the event, this is what happened, and if let's say you only have one class, can you use that class to just explore other events that, or maybe not other events, but like the things that led up to it, some of them.
Yeah.
And say like, this isn't finished. This isn't the end of this topic. We could go on and on, and sort of use that to help inspire asking good questions, thinking critically, because probably, and this is what's going to come out in Transferable Everything as a book, is the importance of things like critical thinking.
Sure.
Which we could say it's taught in school-esque, but I don't know how much it's intentionally taught. How to think critically,
right.
How to ask good questions as you explore a topic. And so I don't know that you need to go to the bottom of the well, but you need to explore it to some degree to start to ask some questions and learn how to ask questions and learn, okay, maybe this text suggests this, but is there more to that? Is there more that we could ask of it? And how do we seek those answers? And then when we find answers that contradict one another, then we can explore it. Another portion of it is we look at a textbook as like sort of a Bible in the school system. But let's say a history textbook. Well, historians can disagree with each other.
Yeah.
So if you select this textbook and that becomes sort of definitive, that's the Bible of this period of time, then all of a sudden people like me and many others, they leave school, they start to get that spark back, you start to explore things, and you find contradictory answers still from historians.
Right.
So you can't just paint the picture of like, well, this is what historians say.
Yeah.
Because they don't.
Yeah, it's just what
agree.
McGraw-Hill said.
Right. You're right. Yes.
Sure.
And so, what do you do with that? That's something I would love to see taught. How do you reconcile who to listen to? How do you ask questions of each of them individually and challenge each of their positions?
Right. Were you afforded much room in your high school experience to wrestle with that stuff, like in an open forum, and have teachers like maybe call you out or call you out on your ability?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I want to say no instinctively.
Yeah.
Because I feel like because it's something that's so meaningful to me, I would have.
Yeah, sure.
It would have left an impression on me, and it obviously didn't.
Yeah.
That being said, that was a tough period of my life, and I've wrestled with my own negative outlook on the experience. So I want to leave it as I don't recall.
Fair enough.
But
see, I was afforded the privilege of having very good history teachers in high school. Two in particular who both had kind of a sarcastic, sharp undertone, where they would allow you the space to interact and wrestle with the subject matter and then kind of shoot you a look like, come on, buddy. So you were challenged on your critical capabilities, not in a way where you felt embarrassed, but kind of challenged to do better. And because I respected both of them a lot, I felt like it was worth accepting that challenge.
Okay, so I don't mean any offense to anyone who's taught me. In many cases, I don't remember names to even, not that I would ever call anyone out. But I don't recall respecting a lot of my teachers. Obviously, I did to a certain extent. But because of all those things I was describing, and there was this like intuitive side of me that felt like we're missing the mark here, collectively. They're missing the mark. They're focusing on all the wrong things. And I totally get that at that time, you're like, well, who the hell are you, Daniel, to be thinking those things? But I felt so deeply these things that I couldn't shake it. Now, later I wrestled with that and eventually got to a place where like, hey, Daniel, your intuitions were kind of right. And although I'm open for someone to help me see the other side of it, and so I didn't have a ton of respect because they just seemed like mouthpieces for the curriculum. They weren't standing on their own 2 feet and their mastery of a topic or anything like that. they followed a curriculum, and they were just a conduit standing there. And if I challenged something, let's say, it just felt like, well, they're not going to think for themselves. They're just going to reference the material.
Fair.
And so, like, I'm not even speaking to almost like a unique individual that can speak on their own accord. They've got protocols and things they have to follow. So, like, there's all these guardrails that I could sort of imaginatively see. And it's like, okay, so I can only push them so far left or right.
Sure.
And there's going to be no individuality. And so
Yeah.
I struggled with that at the time as well.
Yeah, well, not all of my teachers were the same as these individuals.
Sure.
To be fair, like I experienced both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Just these two, and one in particular, seemed so passionate about the subject matter that they're beholden to a curriculum, but there was way more than what was on the books that we were taught.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I want to leave the door open that I'm sure I had at least one or two teachers that did that, and I apologize for not recalling.
Of course. Well, I mean, we often remember the more negative aspects than the positive when reflecting upon things like that. At least I do.
Yeah, so that's something as well that I've thought about, where I feel like I often remember the positives less than negatives.
Interesting.
If I was to say, like, you know, in relationships, you know, and I don't mean just romantic ones, friendships and things like that.
Sure.
Relationships with family members. You look backwards, I often remember the positive things as highlights, and it kind of tuck away the negatives.
Right.
I more have to remind myself of those. But in this particular case, I just stuck on these negatives in a pessimistic way.
Fair.
So much so that when last year I brought my oldest child to school for the very first time, I can still clearly remember the feeling of grabbing the handle of the door to his school, taking him there for the very first time, and this incredible amount of anxiety that came over me. Not to leave him alone at the school, but because I just thought to myself, I've had such a terrible experience. How could I do this to my child and put him back there? And again, I don't want to bash it. It sounds like I am, and so I'm just giving lip service, but it's really not the intention.
Sure.
It's just to share my experiences, and that's something I had to wrestle with and work through personally, you know, my own issues from the past, and not to project them onto my oldest, because he seems anyways that he's probably somebody that would excel in that type of environment. And so, you know, I have to be cognizant of that, even if it wasn't the greatest for me personally.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's fair as well to look at it from the sense that we know a lot of people. We know how people can be.
Yeah.
And so you're giving an institution and a number of individuals to have a massive influence that goes beyond the curriculum. There's kind of like a giving up to the, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Basically giving yourself up to accept the fact that other people are going to influence your child.
Yeah. That's scary.
And like based on your experience, you had people who would probably not have the greatest influence.
Yeah. And it it's not that even if they don't have the best influence, that there's nothing to gain from it. But you know, I'm very cognizant of time as well. Like, time is precious to me, and so I want to always optimize time. How can I get the most efficient use of time? And so I think through that lens a little bit as well.
Yeah.
So even if there is, you know, there's positives that you can get and so forth. It's like, okay, but like, you know, the idea is to really optimize that time in an efficient way.
Yeah.
And if that's not at the forefront of what's happening, then, you know, I've got questions. I also think it's important to kind of not just, you know, share my personal experiences, but also kind of reconcile what I think makes more sense and, you know, maybe potential solutions. But one of the things that I've wondered about a little bit more is where most of the ideas come from for the institution. It sort of seems to me like, most people who work inside of the institutions have sort of been in the institution, probably excelled within it, and so liked aspects of it, and chose to continue their professional careers back into the institution.
Right.
And so it becomes this like, most people never break out of the institution, and then they become the ones that inform what happens inside of it. And it's this like feedback loop that can't be broken. And the idea of the institution in of itself, at least as far as I understand it, has been to prepare people for the real world.
Right.
But if it's designed and made up by people who don't truly know the real world, especially professionally speaking, then, are there gaps that exist because of that? And I don't know that that's true. That's simply a question of, me trying to think a little bit critically through some of the things that might be contributing, because, I can look at our industry. I don't know that the curriculum at the post-secondary level for our industry in fire and life safety really draws on what is it that the companies who are hiring these people are looking for. Yeah, no one's ever asked me. I don't know anyone else that's being asked these questions, but really 2 years after, 3 years after, depending on the course they take, at the end of that, company like ours is hiring them. So it would only make sense to me that we have some input of the things the skills that we're looking for,
right,
and how they might optimize their time to help the students develop those skills, and get continuous feedback, because we're continuously hiring them as they come out of school. So it's just some of the reasons I ask these questions.
Yeah. Particularly in post-secondary type stuff, where it's career-specific training in a lot of cases, and you're paying a good deal of money to get this training. There's certain, you definitely want to be getting what you pay for.
Yeah. Yeah, and you feel that because it's more direct, it's more transactional on the upfront. But still, the same thing is true as a parent. My tax dollars go to pay the institutions.
Sure.
It's just not a one-to-one transaction.
Yeah, that's fair.
And you can't feel it. It's sort of like you've already paid it. It's like the girl math memes.
It's like the contract, right?
Right.
The contract we sign at birth and have no choice to sign, at least in
Yes.
this country, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a really deep rabbit hole.
Yes.
I feel like there's a lot I could potentially say. Some of it would be more opinion-based than fact-based.
Sure.
To be fair. But certainly, I wouldn't want to single out individual teachers, like you said before, because there's still, I have to imagine there's a level that a teacher has when they go into the profession. They're doing it because they want to teach, you would hope.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Are they doing it because they want to cultivate people? Are they doing it because they feel that cultivated people are more necessary for a functional society? I'm sure for some people it's just a job. I know a handful of people who went into the profession because they got a post-secondary degree. They're like, well, what am I going to do with this? I guess I could teach. So when it's an afterthought, I don't know. I feel like what I'm saying is a bit devoid of nuance as well, because it has the potential to be very complex. People have their reasons for doing what they do.
Sure.
But you come to the institution, like you said, and it's such a big thing. And who are the decision makers, and why do we learn what we learn? Who's making those decisions? It's almost on a societal level. Who has decided what the important things are?
Right.
pulling back to history, you mentioned again that there was a lot of nuance that you weren't afforded, or like perhaps you wanted to learn about propaganda, for instance. Well, they say that history is written by the victor. So
Sure.
we did learn a lot of propaganda.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I was learning about, like on my own, about the propaganda in, Nazi Germany pre-World War II, right? But never through the lens of the material
Sure.
can be propaganda in of itself.
But what I mean is the propaganda that we're being fed.
That's what
side.
I mean. Right, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot more questions about that today, and not to go down this rabbit hole, but
Sure.
like things like our media
Right.
and, things, our textbooks
Yes.
in of themselves, or like, I think, and I definitely don't want to go into this space, but I think COVID was an interesting example simply because you had many doctors and scientists on literal opposite sides. And so for people like us who don't know the science
Right.
per se, how am I supposed to distinguish between which scientist is correct about the position?
Sure, like I have to defer to an expert, but if you have two experts with differing opinion,
Precisely.
right? So ultimately, I fell in line with the prevailing
Right.
like positions.
Right.
But however those were, like the collective came to that decision, is whatever's happening in the background.
Exactly. Exactly. And so at the very least, recognizing and understanding those things, what kind of influence can exist.
Yeah.
Because I think this is one of the solutions to the world we're kind of going into, that we're already in, and arguably already were in. But it's even more important to today is there's so much information. There's so much nuance that's available to us. Each individual person has to start to learn how to think critically and sort of peel layers apart and do their own self-analysis of a thing. And the chances that we're going to get it 100% right as individuals it's low. But at the very least, we have to try, and we have to be able to learn to do these things, because we can't just take everything at face value. Oh, the media said, oh, the textbook said, oh, Google said, Wikipedia said,
Yeah.
right? Because we at least understand. We can't be willfully ignorant anymore.
Sure.
And so I think these are critical skills. And I guess what I argue is that they've always been critical skills. It's under the microscope that much more now because of these things. For example, this is a question I was wondering. I've not teased this out even fully in my own brain. So like, this is completely exploratory. I was thinking about encyclopedias. And so encyclopedias or textbook. So if we look at an encyclopedia that was sort of gospel, 20 years ago, okay? If the information that's in there, or at least pieces of it, is incorrect based on what we know today, was it always correct, or were we just given incorrect information that we took as correct? And what's the value of that? And so, we always have there's this hubris that, we know everything today.
Right.
And we forget that with time, with our ability to kind of move deeper into topics, analyze them deeper, and with more nuance,
Sure.
we uncover new truths.
Yeah, and we do it all the time.
Yes.
I think that's one of the biggest values we get out of post-secondary institutions, like research facilities and universities and so forth, because sure, they're people who are deeply ingrained in their field, but they are constantly challenging each other with different opinions and theses and so forth.
Agreed.
And so, like, I love being wrong.
Yeah.
I wish everybody loved being as wrong as I love being wrong.
Yeah.
And going back to the post-secondary component, there is a level of I don't know if I would call it scientific rigor. I'm sure it is in the sciences, but as far as how people document their challenges to things or proving themselves correct over former prevailing truths. There's a formality to it, which is necessary in order to revise these old documents.
Right. So then did I waste time learning wrong things? See, this is where, for me, if we spent more time learning to think critically, go on that adventure and ask deeper questions, then whether the material was right or wrong matters less. But now, because I was tested on it and I had to memorize it,
Right.
to me, I'm like, well, I just wasted time memorizing and learning things that are wrong.
But then you would have been deprived of the opportunity to have something you held as true shattered in order to understand that maybe you should be thinking more critically.
Sure.
It's a teachable moment.
Absolutely.
It's an unfortunate one.
Totally. And I think it's a beautiful one, because that was one of the things I just wrote down that you touched on, which is great, and the importance of being wrong, that you like to be wrong.
Sure.
And so it is a teachable moment, but I think that's kind of, to bring things back to transferable everything, is adding intention to these teachable moments.
Right.
Like, nobody walked me through the importance of that teachable moment.
Sure.
And on repeat, because that's one of the best things that you can learn. In fact, I had to unlearn a few things in my 20s. Like, I wanted to be right about things.
Sure.
But I was also taught that. I was taught that because you don't want to be wrong on tests, you get bad grades.
Right.
And my grades were terrible. And so the perception of Daniel was that Daniel was this unintelligent, poor student. And in many ways, I was a poor student. And in many ways, because of myself, I was my own worst enemy. But that it's sort of, inside of that institution, the importance of being right is really highlighted, underscored, bolded, and all of that. Where later in my 20s, I made a commitment to myself where I said I would go back to the very beginning of everything that I know, and I didn't care what was true. I only wanted to find the truth of any topic, of anything that I had learned. It didn't matter whether I was right or I was wrong, or somebody I cared about was right or wrong, somebody I respected. It didn't matter. It was, and the position could change over time. It was just this commitment to go on a journey for any topic and find what is true. And I also think about it, and maybe it was, and I completely missed it, but I also feel like that impression would have been left on me. I would just really love to see that as like a core value and message of just seeking the truth, whatever it may be.
Sure.
Within the school system.
I want to address something that you said, going back to the encyclopedia bit.
Yeah.
And it's about something that was wrong that had to be corrected.
Yeah.
Outside of the conversation of whether or not it was a waste of time, was it wrong in those textbooks because we didn't know the truth? Or was it wrong because we were being told a different truth?
That's a fair question.
Obviously, that's a bit of a deeper conversation that goes into the institution and conditioning and forming the minds of individuals for the workforce, et cetera. But there could also be, and I'm not suggesting there is, but a nefarious angle to it.
Of course.
We're intentionally not being given the truth sometimes.
Sure. And I think simply you posing those as possibilities is what is required to go on a journey to discover the truth.
Right.
It's like every individual now has to be sort of like their own investigative journalist. They have to really submit to the scientific method and what science really is, which is to challenge ideas.
Sure.
And to, challenge a thesis, even if there's studies that currently exist that suggest this is true.
Right.
There's deeper studies we can go into. There's better ways to account for variables and peel layers apart. And it's a worthwhile thing to do.
Sure. Question everything,
Yeah,
even yourself.
especially yourself. Yeah, and how do you do that? And, there's ways that we'll actually discuss later in the book of how to do that. But I think to bring things back to full circle on transferable everything, the world as our classroom, I think that's one of the most important components, and it's something that I felt intuitively, in part because of my experiences in my very early teens, traveling and as a soccer player, getting to go to different countries, see different cultures, and so forth. That I would come back, and I was so fortunate. So like that's a message I really want to make sure it lands, is that I see myself as so fortunate to have been gifted these experiences. Not that they weren't earned in part by my effort as a soccer player, but I got to experience these things nonetheless, and they were very formative. And I would come back, and I could recognize changes in me each time, even amongst my peers. The way I could think and see things because of that. And then so fast forward to the end of grade 12 for me, this is early, not even mid 2000s. It's like 2007. And all of my peers are getting ready to go to post-secondary education. And that's important back then. It's very important. And I made the decision to not go to post-secondary and to take a chance on myself. And I had an opportunity to fly to the south of France and pursue my dream of becoming a professional soccer player. And it did not materialize anywhere near the way I thought it would. I mean, it was a big decision, and one that was very hard for my parents. My mom worked in the school system, for pretty much my whole life. And so that was hard for her to imagine. And I'll explain her thoughts after of the experience. But basically, I made the decision that I wasn't going to pursue that, and I would move to the south of France for this opportunity, which basically was completely shattered the moment the plane landed. And I got off the plane, and there's this guy holding a sign, and I get into his car thinking that I'm going to a centre de formation, which is, a professional academy system. And that's not what happened. It was later, so I went to his house, and, I was able to stay the night, and then he dropped me off at a hostel the next day, and said sort of, that's it. And some people have been to hostels, and there's some nice ones. This particular one was not great at all. I was terrified. They locked us inside at night. The first night I shared a room with a bunch of guys from sort of Eastern Europe that were, they were doing some drugs and all of that. I was only 18 years old. And so I slept sitting in the stall with my suitcases and until they went to sleep. And then I went to my bed, put all my suitcases on my bed, and then I slept on top. Very, very scared for what might happen through the night. And then I couldn't stay there during the day. I had to go to basically the streets. I had to just be somewhere, and I didn't have a lot of money, so I basically found in front of a library in Nice. I found some steps, and I just sat on the steps, and that became my daily thing for the next couple weeks. And long story short, is this became one of the most formative experiences of my life. I came back from that experience, a year later, and this is where my mom could clearly see this was probably the best education I could have ever received, because I learned so much during that time. And that's, I think, where in many ways the world became my classroom. It got to teach me hard truths, how different parts of the world live and operate, a lot about myself, how to survive, how to go through hardships on my own. It taught me a lot about my faith because I'm a person of faith. There's so much that I can unpack in that experience. It's something I wish most young people could experience. And I draw on those lessons today far more than anything I learned inside of a classroom. And so I see those components as the world being that classroom and our teacher.
Right.
And so with Transferable Everything, the idea is, how can we allow it to be our teacher? A lot of this I look back on and I can reflect on it and I can extract lessons and principles, and I tried to do my best at the time. But I think there's, and that's true for a lot of people, the hindsight and reflection, but I think there's an opportunity to intentionally use those experiences and learn immediately, without delay, without having to wait for an extended period of time. In real time, learn those lessons as they're happening. And that's something that, I've become a little bit obsessed with thinking about. So something I wanted to add actually is I have two younger brothers. They're both amazing. They're both soccer players, sort of following in my footsteps, although they're goalies, so maybe some screws missing or something. But both of them have had experiences now traveling overseas. And my oldest brother currently is living overseas and has been for a little bit. And he, it's been a roller coaster ride for him, but you can see the difference that these experiences can create. Even the most challenging ones where he had this really amazing opportunity and it sort of dissolved right before his eyes in the blink of an eye, like with one email, very quickly. And there's so many lessons that are packed inside of that moment. One of the most important, and it's one that is critically important that you learn as an athlete, which is focusing on the things that are within your control. This particular thing was outside of his control. And you have to recognize and respect the existence of that. Like, you can only control so many things. You could do everything right and still fail, which is something I experienced. I felt like I did, everything right. Not that it was perfect, but I committed to doing as much as I can in pursuit of that dream, making as many sacrifices as I possibly can. Of course, I could have done things better, but in large, I did everything right at the level of commitment and intention. And I can see that within them. And, of course, there's schooling impacts and stuff like that. You have to get a little bit more creative of how you deal with that. But, as we were talking through some of these things as a family, one of the things that I was able to share, which I didn't actually think about until very recently, was that when I lived in France, eventually I got a place, and two other Canadians came to live with me. One was one of my best friends, and the other was another guy who was with the sort of agent that had sent me there in a very misleading way. And so there's three of us going through this experience together in many ways. One of whom is an academy coach at an MLS club, and he's brilliant, phenomenal coach. Every young player to play under him is so lucky, and so he's obviously doing well for himself. Sure. Beautiful family. One of the other guys, or the other guy, I should say. He's, as far as I understand, he's a doctor now, and I've had an all right career in becoming an entrepreneur, and so at that time, however, the sacrifice we were making within the school system was seen as something that would lead to towards inevitable failure of our progression in life. That was the view. It's hard for young people because I think these things are more welcomed and accepted now, but it's hard for young people to imagine that world existed. People just could not think beyond that. There was like a governor in place and they're thinking. And so anyways, I say that to say that, I've seen the positive effects of this time and time again, but I do believe that there has to be intention behind learning it.
Sure, and I think intentionality, regardless of where you end up, is probably one of the more important things you could internalize.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like the transferable everything idea is intention is transcendent of anything.
Sure, because I was pushed down the route of post-secondary education, but it's because I all throughout high school you're told like, okay, there's going to be a next step. The next step is more education. That education is going to be grounded in the field you believe you'll find yourself in. And I was somebody who didn't know what that field was going to be, and went with something regardless because I was told I had to. But there wasn't a whole lot of intentionality behind that.
Right.
And I certainly would have gotten a lot more out of it had there been.
Yeah. But it's hard to apply intention to something that you're not passionate about.
Sure.
And so I think there's always going to be a barrier there that's going to exist.
But with that said, there are things in life that you have to do that you don't necessarily want to do.
Yes.
But if you do those things with intention, you're going to get a lot better at that thing.
Yeah.
You would hope you're going to get better results.
Sure.
If you're fully committed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say that because just yesterday I was having a conversation with my 5-year-old, and he was giving me pushback on something that he didn't want to do, basically eating food he didn't want to eat.
Yeah.
And obviously he's not going to understand, but I had said to him exactly, one of the best things I can teach you is how to learn to do things you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Meant nothing to him, and I'm sure I'll repeat it a million more times by the time it means something to him. But there is intention behind those words for me as a parent in teaching that as what I see as a very important lesson.
Sure.
So I totally...
But for me, there's a layer above that when I'm sure you've witnessed it in the workplace, which is that people do things they don't want to do frequently, but they can do it lackadaisically,
right,
or without intention, or with intention, and the results speak for themselves.
Yes.
You can do something to get it done and kind of like just bite it and make your way through, or you can be like, okay, let's do this for real.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's... And this is something where I failed as a student because I didn't do that. But there's a there's a component that I experienced professionally where it was like, even if I was doing something that I didn't want to do, that I didn't love, I wasn't passionate about, I wanted to do it to create an outcome where I could say I was X. So, I don't want to clean bathrooms. Like, that's not what I'm passionate about. But if it was a job that I had to do, I did want to be someone who's seen and does have work ethic. And so I need to intentionally apply work ethic to that thing that I don't like in order to be somebody who has work ethic.
Sure.
Because you can't be both. Now, that being said, that's something that I admittedly missed very clearly as a student.
Yeah.
The thing that I was hung up on was I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will, which is something I am typically good at, but I felt like, it didn't matter. It wasn't going to contribute to the end goal or the thing that I wanted. It wasn't giving me enough. It was presented as consequential. I just couldn't buy it. And probably to a fault. And that's, where I definitely failed when I take responsibility of my time as a student. That being said, I've been a student again as an adult,
Right.
and I still struggled with that component, because we were doing things that I just thought, oh my goodness, how is this even real? Like it was almost like we weren't being taught to be taught, to learn a lesson or a principle or something deeper. It was almost like we were solely being taught so somebody could say they taught it to us. If something happened in that field of work, it's almost like it was performative for liability purposes than it was to actually educate me on something.
Sure, like just to check off the rubric.
That's right.
Right on. You had me thinking about something in there as well, which is there's a social element when it comes to intentionality in doing things. And I think we had it before social media, but we have it a lot more now. Speaking to the performative aspect, which is people don't always do things to do things. They do things to be seen doing that thing.
Right.
Or, I often hear people saying, it would be cool if I did this because then I would have the story to say that, hey, look, I did this thing.
Sure.
Where are you showing off? Is it just another book on the bookshelf?
Right.
Or do you really want to do that thing?
Yeah. I didn't think I would share this story, but I think it's important. So when I was in the military, there's a specialty within combat engineers. They're called combat divers. These guys are amazing. They're hard as nails. Their week selection it's crazy hard. It's stuff you would see in a military YouTube clip of people doing the hardest stuff you can imagine. And they go on a course that's, I don't know, I think it's like 6 months or something like that. And that course is still equally as hard as that 1 week selection. And so I decided that I was going to go on this selection. Now, I went on this selection for 2 reasons. One, because I was told, based on my fitness level, that I should. This is what you do. This is the natural progression. And the second is because those guys, I saw them as, tremendous soldiers, highly competent. They garnered a lot of respect. And so they had this patch that they wore, this badge that meant something. And I wanted that too. But I had no interest in being a combat diver. Zero. It doesn't fascinate me. There's no curiosity there. I didn't like any of it. So I showed up and, I did the first day, really, really hard day. Everyone who failed out on day 1. The next day I woke up and I was like, no, I can't do this. And I didn't want to do it. And that was a really good reminder for me of when you really want something, it doesn't matter what someone's going to put you through. And
Right.
all of those guys that were left, not only were they tremendous soldiers, hardworking, their grit and resilience was, above the rest, but they really wanted to be combat divers. And so it was amazing for them, an amazing experience. But for somebody like me, I only wanted to be there for the badge, really, to say I was the guy. That was the only motivation I had.
Right.
And that's not actually enough to achieve something, to go through such obstacles.
Right.
And that's it kind of made me think of that experience. And, I later had to wrestle within myself for years of thinking, okay, well, am I a quitter because I quit? I didn't see myself as a quitter because I didn't quit in the moment when something was hard. I woke up, I thought about it through the night, woke up, reported in the next morning to kick things off. And, you know, they tried to convince me not to. But, you know, it just didn't make sense for me.
Yeah.
And so now I look back on that moment, and it was a wise use of my time. And there's no point in, even if it means you have to quit, in pursuing something that, especially where you're going to give so much of yourself and so much sacrifice solely to say that I've never quit anything.
Right.
But there's still an aspect that I had to reconcile that within myself. Anyways, it reminded me of that. And for them, you know, one of my best friends in the world became a combat diver. I would love to have that experience with him. But it just didn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. This is going to be a bit out of my wheelhouse to say so, but, you know, presumably if you had gone through with it, you might've been a less effective, operator than those who really had the heart.
Totally. One of my friends, actually, he said to me, he's like, you know, as I was wrestling with the idea, he said, Daniel, you'll end up taking a spot from somebody who truly wants to be there. And that kind of stuck with me. And that makes sense. This is where the wrestling came, where you question everything within myself, is like, okay, but is that just my cognitive dissonance because I wanted to quit because it was hard? And so within ourselves, we're always trying to sort the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah.
You know, and but I've kind of landed on it. It made the most sense, and I think that's been true also for everything I've done after, and upon reflection, everything I thought about or I did prior, like the sacrifices and the struggles I had to make as a soccer player. I didn't apply any of those into the school system if I was to be critical of myself.
Yeah.
And so that's where my failing is as a student, because I have a responsibility to put forth effort and all of that. And I totally recognize that. There was a block there for me where I just couldn't see the value beyond.
Sure.
For all the reasons I said at the beginning. But where I did see the value was all the things I was learning through experience, moving through the world, getting to travel, explore, getting to talk to people, which is something I was very fortunate to do. And that taught me a lot. And so yeah, it's been a challenge, and it still is a challenge, like I said.
Sure. Yeah. I have a vastly different experience than you, just in terms of where I've been and how I got here.
Yeah.
I was also a very immature student.
Right.
And going back to intentionality and goal setting, I don't think I had those things back then. It was just education is the next step, getting from grade 7 to 8 to 10, 11, et cetera. It's just, I keep moving because I have to keep moving. I'm being worked through a system where I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do, what I was going to be doing, just kind of coasting.
Right.
So I knew that I was learning things, but there was not a whole lot of depth to thinking about the things I was thinking about.
Right. But you're so obviously brilliant and intelligent. So did you just survive? You said you weren't going into depth. Did you just survive because your ability to recall things, you know, allowed you to, even though you weren't going into the depth? Or what do you think contributed to that?
I mean, like, there were some classes I didn't do well in. I'm not good at mathematics.
Sure.
I'm very interested in the sciences, but the mathematic component, like, shafted me.
Right.
When it comes to, like, written stuff, like languages and philosophy and history and so forth, I don't necessarily think I can attribute that to memory, because my memory's bad.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, it's really bad. So I'm not sure.
Interesting.
I don't know. I'm a curious person, and I'm really interested in things. I like to know why they work and how they work.
Yeah.
And why it's necessary to know the things that I'm knowing. But I wasn't extracting like lessons through my experience at the time.
Right.
Or if I was, it was happening subconsciously.
Right.
So for instance, you talk about your time in Nice and on the streets and learning a lot about the world and about yourself. Well, my experience in high school and in elementary school outside of the educational component, let's call it the social component, wasn't awesome. So
Sure.
I'm sure I was learning a lot about people during that time as well. I just wasn't thinking about it.
Yeah. That's fair. And I think for most people that's true. But I think that's it. What's interesting is, like you said, you had a very different experience, yet that's something that we can connect on, that curiosity and wanting to learn and understand things. You know, you went through the educational system, all the way to the end, and I kind of arguably didn't in many ways, even though, I went to college and so forth, because I was told I needed the piece of paper, and I wasn't sure what to do next. So I figured, I'll do that at least.
I think if I could add, I guess, there's always been an element inside of me being like the notion of common knowledge and what that is. And perhaps mine has been a little more elevated than what common knowledge actually is. Like there's certain assumptions or inferences.
Right.
So that could potentially be the reason why I didn't think too deeply about these things, because it's always come across to me as a given.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. The notion of like common sense,
Sure.
almost.
Yeah. Common sense is not so common.
It's it's not. It's not. It's the we were having a discussion recently about health and safety in the workplace, which most of it is common sense.
Yeah.
It's very clearly common sense.
Don't put chemicals in water bottles.
Yeah, right. But it exists for a reason, because common sense is not so common.
Sure.
And sort of trying to understand what is common sense and how is it learned and what contributes to it. I think there is a bit of there's some connective tissue there with the idea of transferable everything and like learning general principles through experiences and so forth. It's the idea of like, I think we said it previously in another episode, like not crying over spilt milk, right? Like obviously don't cry over spilt milk, but there's more to it than that singular moment. There's a larger principle behind that. That makes sense. And I'm not sure that the understanding of that is so common. It kind of reminds me a little bit of one of my favorite books, and it's referenced in this, I believe, in this chapter, and it's about generalists. The title of the book is Range. I believe the subtitle is Why Generalists Succeed in a Hyper Specialized World, by David Epstein, and I think it's something that we forgot as a society. We spent so much time looking at people within specializations and the importance of it, the depth of what they can learn in a narrow field. And we forgot why broader thinking, generalized thinking is so critically important, because you can bring new ideas, new understanding, and apply it across domains, across specialties. And, I believe one of the examples that's used in Range is cardiologists. And so there's hopefully I'm getting this right. There is a study done about patients having an increased chance of survival when a general practitioner doctor was at the hospital versus a cardiologist. Said differently, everything looks like a nail to a hammer. And I think that's one of the things that, the school system was teaching for such a long time. And one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite books is because it spoke to me. It helped me understand or make sense of parts of myself where like I see myself as a generalist. And unless I was deeply interested in a topic, it was hard to go into the depth of it.
Right.
I started to think about this thing more broadly. And then so as the teacher's going into the depth, my brain starts thinking about the breadth of it. And I think that's something that is worth figuring out how we could teach to think broadly, to think with some common sense, to distill experiences into principles and so forth. And, hopefully that's something we can accomplish in writing the book, Transferable Everything.
Sure.
Because I think it'll make a tremendous difference for most people. At least it has for me and friends of mine
Right.
who have started to think in those terms. I think yourself, obviously, included.
Sure. Yeah, I think looking to my experience, cultivating curiosity, it's come fairly natural to me. I'm a very curious person, but in others specifically who don't have it, is a good way to become more of a generalist. In that, I'm curious about virtually every domain, to a degree.
Right.
So if I want to be able to jump between those things and follow my manic drives and my limited attention span that has me hopping between hobby or interest and so forth, there has to be some kind of commonality that allows me to do that.
Right.
And curiosity is one of those driving forces.
Sure.
Now, it's also a negative thing in some respects because if I rely on curiosity alone, I'm never going to spend enough time on any given subject to become or have a level of proficiency.
Yeah. Well, I think in saying that, and this is why I don't want to bash the educational system or the institution. Like I said, my 5-year-old, I think that it might be the right space for him and how it's designed for him to learn and optimize. I mean, time will tell, but I don't see for him it being a potential negative as in the same way maybe my younger child it might be. But I think it's more the recognition that, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution to education. And that's the thing that I want to impart. Just like we need people who are specialists.
Sure.
They hyper-specialize on a thing. They can go deep on a topic, and they're so passionate about that. I think that's so important. But we also need to accept that and this is why Range is such a powerful book, is we do need generalists.
Right.
We need people to think more broadly. I just don't think we've figured out how to identify those people or how to teach them effectively. So if it's not tangible, if we can't put it onto a scorecard or a KPI can't be created from it, then it's almost like it doesn't exist, right? It's just an intangible we can't see. And I think that's something in general that we struggle with, is we put all of our effort and time into things that are quantifiable. And there's so many things that aren't. Sure. I mean, even in us as individuals, we can quantify the value of what we make professionally,
right?
Our investments and all of that. We can't quantify in a moment, the value of the time we spend with our family, the meaning behind it. And so it's easier to put our time into the thing that we can quantifiably see grow than it is anything else. And I think there's some overlap there.
Is there anything else from the chapter specifically that you want to pinpoint or try and challenge or tease out? Admittedly, this is one I haven't read.
Yeah, totally fair. And I sprung it on you. But it's only because we didn't decide, and I knew that it's one we've talked about ad nauseum. So one of the things that's interesting, and I don't know that it's actually in the chapter, but it will be once, there is a broader plan to work on the field manuals for some specific areas that we want, like athletics and so forth. So one of the things is within athletics specifically. So there's actually two things I want to tease out before we wrap this up.
Cool.
One is in the athletics. So this is for parents who have realized that their child athlete isn't going to play professionally and maybe not even get, a scholarship, a sports scholarship to a school. And they say, well, okay, they've been playing at the highest level. Now they're 15 years old. They're not going to get there. That's okay. Everyone's okay with that. They've accepted it. And so they're going to drop down and play like house league soccer or, a significantly lower form of whatever they were playing. I think that there's a mistake there. I think that, and it's often under the guise of, well, let's help them explore and see other things, right? And although I think there is value in that, of course, I think there's a lot of unrecognized value in, and you would sort of rob them of the opportunity to be so focused and committed to bettering themselves and being in an environment that is focused on that and is pushing them. So have them play at the highest level they possibly can, even if it's going to go nowhere, because the lessons that get uncovered, the character development, the principles that they can learn are invaluable. And arguably, they may never get that opportunity. Once they go to post-secondary and they have no scholarship, then they can explore other, sports that they want to play at, just a recreational level and all of that. But those last 2 years might be the last 2 years of their life where they are totally focused and committed on bettering themselves in this singular domain. And robbing them of that opportunity is something that I don't think is probably worthwhile. And so that's my initial thought. I don't know what you think about that.
I'm probably missing the point here a bit, but I'm just curious about one thing, and it's something that I don't know much about because I'm not super into the sports world, particularly soccer.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about what are they called, managers or coaches?
Yeah.
Is there a high percentage of people in those roles, especially in the professional federations, that didn't play at high level soccer themselves?
Are you like professional coaches?
Sure.
No.
So most of them have been players?
Most of them have been players. Now, I would say there's no correlation to how good they were during their time or at what level they played.
Sure.
As long as they played professionally or as close to it as possible and then committed themselves as managers.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm getting at, like in terms of cutting them too early or saying like, hey, how about you play a lower level because it's just casual now. Being exposed to the highest level of sport capable still affords them the opportunity to grow within that space, potentially becoming a trainer or a coach or a manager, should they have the passion for the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it changes as you get older. Maybe not in certain expectations, but how you train, the things you have to do, the things you have to be committed to during a training session, or, if you look more long term, how you treat your body at 14 versus 17 is different.
Yeah.
And obviously the older you get, the more that changes. And so, and then the type of training you do, right? Like you always have to do, fundamentals are always fundamentals. But say at 14, you're still learning fundamentals.
Yeah.
At 17, you should know them and you're trying to enhance them.
Sure.
But you're not learning new things, or you shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And so how you train then changes. What you can do as a coach with those players, you can do the training sessions can be structured very different because they're walking in with a base set of knowledge that allows you to structure that training session very different. Whereas at 14, you have to structure it, with some like teaching things that are completely new to them. So, not experiencing those things is probably wouldn't serve them more long term.
Right.
But I think like also the mindset, like your mindset of making sacrifices at 17 is a lot harder than at 14.
Yeah.
Because when you're 17, you know, there's things like, you know, relationships, romantic relationships that you're probably a little bit more interested in exploring, which means there's more sacrifice. There's more distractions that are pulling your mind away while you're trying to be hyper focused on a thing that don't quite exist fully at 13 and 14 maybe. So having those experiences of the distractions at new levels, I think is important while you're trying to be focused on the thing. And as we all know, you know, if you want to get better at anything, there is sacrifice, no matter what level it's at. There's sacrifice and there's focus, and like we've said so many times now, intentionality.
Yeah, and at the lowest levels, you're not even training fundamentals really. In house league, where you were showing up to play and have fun.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of personal responsibility required to try to work on fundamentals or skills within the game, if that's what you're even looking for.
Right.
The fundamental piece is interesting. You said like around the age of 17, you've pretty well learned all of the fundamentals.
Yeah.
But you still train them, correct?
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about other examples that I could bring in, people who are at the top of their game in any particular sphere. The fundamentals are still so important. You might not necessarily learn anything new, but there's a spark that you can find in the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Like a little nuance that takes you to the next level, however small it might be on top of that fundamental.
Yeah.
So you could look at weightlifting and like micro loading.
Sure.
Once you get to a certain level, you're not going to be making huge skill jumps.
Yeah.
They're little ones. But every once in a while, you'll hit this little spark.
Sure. Yeah. It's the same thing. Like one of the values of doing fundamentals might be not bettering yourself, you know, with say like your first touch, but maybe that training session where you're doing it, you've shown up and you have a ton of distractions or things that have happened that are playing in your brain, but you still have to show up and create the same outcome within the fundamentals. And so the thing you're working on isn't necessarily even the fundamental in of itself. It's everything in here and ensuring that in the moment it's not negatively contributing to the fundamental.
Yeah.
And that's the thing you're learning, and it shows up maybe as improving on your fundamental, because you are getting a positive outcome, but it's not that, okay, well, it's just necessarily the added touches in of themselves.
Right.
You're learning the ability to pull the distractions away and be hyper focused on the thing in front of you. And that's the thing you've learned in those moments. But at 14, you might just be learning the fundamental in of itself.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, it's a finesse through refinement.
Yeah. It's not enough time to go into this, but we'll touch on it because I want to bring it in. This was where I think going into we'll discuss more depths of it once we get into the field manual side of things. But one of the reasons why I think this is so important, and maybe this is just like a closing idea or remark in particular, of at least exploring and asking these questions, again, not to trash or reduce the importance, but because we've been so caught up in the specialization or this form of education leads to this outcome, most of us have been conditioned to think in those terms. And we're sort of at the precipice of AI. It's here, but you know, it's not yet wreaking havoc on the professional world just yet. Everyone's saying it's going to some degree. And even if it doesn't wipe out so many jobs, it's fundamentally going to change jobs, either in of themselves or it's going to take away jobs while creating new ones. And so it's a one-for-one exchange. But no matter which way you slice it, that is going to mean that people who have specialization in a particular thing that no longer, where that job no longer exists, they're going to have to pull back, draw on generalized knowledge, transferable knowledge, attributes, characteristics, and underlying principles, and translate those into something new, they're going to have to show up because, most people who are specialized, they're maybe 17 years into their career where they're going to work 30 years and they specialize in this thing.
Yeah.
And now they're going to have to either go to an entry-level job and work many years towards specialization, or they're going to have to learn how to turn that into generalization so they don't have to go to entry-level and they can do maybe more of a lateral move into another industry where their skills can be sort of honed, or they can draw on that generalization. So there's two components. There's the individual that's going to have to learn that professionally, and then there's the executives, employers who are going to have to learn how to welcome those types of people into their organization. And I think that's going to be something very critical, and I think that's where transferable everything might have a place, hopefully, in supporting both of those sides, both the professional and the employer, the executives in some of those transitions. Yeah. I don't know what your thoughts are there to kind of wrap things up.
No, I agree with you. It's an interesting time. Things are moving very, very quickly, and it's super uncertain. I see the world moving in many different directions, and it's unclear which way it's actually going to go. But without question, there are going to be people who either lose their job or have to move laterally, and they are going to need to have some level of transferability in order to do so. Otherwise, it's going to be a slow grind.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, potentially devastating.
Sure.
For a lot of people. And the thing that worries me the most for people in general is I fear that they can't see a light at the end of the tunnel because of this. It just becomes this like desolate, bleak scenario that is going to be completely destructive to them. And having gone through multiple career transitions already and distinct ones, my deepest hope is to help them understand that it won't be. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It won't be easy, and it's going to take a lot of work on their end, and all of us within society, a lot of responsibility for us as employers.
Sure.
But it doesn't have to be. And so I guess the closing message is to help everybody understand, whether you're an athlete transitioning, whether you're a soldier leaving the military, whether you're someone whose career is being disrupted by AI or anything, or just a significant moment in your life of transition, it is an opportunity, and it can be a beautiful, formative one. It's not without trial and tribulation. You'll have to, sort of endure the crucible of that part of life. But on the other end, absolutely can be something beautiful if you intentionally apply a lot of the things that we're talking about.
Yep.